Alien students mocked the human ban. Then they saw the footage. The bell chimed across the Galactic Academy of Interstellar Relations, signaling the end of morning break. Students from 17 different species hurried through the curved hallways, their various appendages carrying data tablets and nutrition containers. The Academy floated in orbit around Centrum, the artificial planet that served as the capital of the Galactic Federation. Alan Parker walked alone, keeping close to the wall. Unlike his classmates, he had only 2 arms, 2 legs, and skin that didn't change color or glow. As the only human exchange student in his year, he had grown used to the stares and whispers. 3 months at the Academy had taught him to ignore most of it. "Hey, soft skin," called a voice behind him. "Did you hear the news?" Alan turned to see Cleason approaching, the Vespidian's 4 arms moving in different directions as he navigated the crowded hallway. His exoskeleton shimmered with green and blue patterns, a sign of amusement among his kind. "What news?" Alan asked, though he already knew. The message had come from Earth Command last night, and he'd spent hours trying to compose a response to his parents. Cleason's mandibles clicked rapidly, the equivalent of a snicker. "Your species has been officially banned from the Centauri military exercises. The Federation Council voted yesterday. Unanimous decision." By now, a small crowd had gathered. Thorax, a telepathic cerulean with floating orbs for eyes, hovered closer. "Poor humans," Thorax said, not bothering to hide his mockery. "Too fragile to play with the big species." Alan took a deep breath. "That's not why. Everyone to class," announced Professor Zixal, her tentacles waving for attention as she glided down the hallway. The 8-limbed Octavian was the Academy's most respected teacher of interspecies military cooperation. "We have much to discuss today." Inside the classroom, students settled into adaptive seats that conformed to their various body shapes. The room arranged itself in a circle, with Professor Zixal in the center. Holographic displays hovered above her head, showing the seal of the Galactic Federation. "As you may have heard," she began, her voice translator giving her words a musical quality. "The Federation Council has made a decision regarding human participation in joint military exercises." All eyes turned to Alan, who kept his face neutral. He had practiced this expression for hours. "Humans will no longer be permitted to join the annual Centauri military exercises," Professor Zixal continued. "This decision was not made lightly, but with the full support of all member species." A Phosphorian student named Lumi raised her crystalline hand. "Professor, why were humans banned? Are they too physically weak?" Before the professor could answer, Cleason chittered loudly. "Obviously. Look at them. Soft skin, no natural armor, dull senses. And they can only breathe one type of atmosphere. How could they possibly contribute?" Several students laughed. Even Professor Zixal's tentacles curled in what Alan recognized as amusement. "The official reason," the professor said, "is that human tactical approaches are incompatible with Federation military doctrine." "Incompatible?" asked Voxlar, an Arcturian whose skin glowed with bioluminescent patterns. "You mean ineffective?" More laughter filled the room. Alan kept his eyes on his tablet, pretending to take notes. "Not ineffective," Professor Zixal corrected, though her tentacles still showed amusement. "Simply unpredictable. Humans approach combat in ways that do not align with established galactic norms." Alan couldn't stay quiet any longer. "We have different experiences with warfare," he said, his voice steady despite the attention suddenly focused on him. "Earth's history shaped our military thinking." "Oh, the human wants to teach us about warfare." Thorax's orb eyes spun with mirth. "Please, enlighten us about your glorious battles against, what was it? Other humans?" "Not just other humans," Alan replied. "Our planet tried to kill us every day for thousands of years. Predators, diseases, natural disasters. We evolved, dealing with threats from all sides." Cleason waved his upper arms dismissively. "Every species faced evolutionary challenges. The difference is, we overcame ours, and became soft," Alan muttered, but not quietly enough. The room fell silent. Professor Zixal's tentacles stopped moving. "Would you care to explain that statement, Mr. Parker?" she asked, her translator unable to hide the chill in her voice. Alan knew he should apologize and back down. That was his job as an exchange student, to represent humanity with dignity and respect. But after weeks of mockery, something in him snapped. "Most species here evolved on worlds with fewer threats than Earth," he said, looking around the room. "You developed technology before you faced true existential dangers. Humans had to survive with sticks and stones against predators that could tear us apart. We didn't have natural weapons, so we had to think differently." "And this makes you superior?" Boxlar asked, his skin flashing with anger. "No," Alan shook his head. "Just different. The ban isn't because we're weak. It's because we approach problems in ways that make other species uncomfortable." Professor Zixal's tentacles rippled, a sign she was considering his words. "An interesting perspective, Mr. Parker. However, the Federation Council has made its decision based on previous joint exercises where human tactics were deemed disruptive." The class continued, but the mood had shifted. While most students still viewed Alan with dismissal or amusement, a few showed curiosity. Lumi, the crystalline phosphorian, caught his eye with what might have been respect. After class, Alan walked quickly toward the dormitories. He wanted to send a message to his friend Samantha Wright, a lieutenant aboard the Earth Defense Force flagship Northern Light. She would understand his frustration. "Parker, wait up." Alan turned to see Klizon approaching, all four arms moving, in what humans would recognize as aggressive body language. "What do you want?" Alan asked, too tired for more mockery. "You think you're special because your species had a rough start?" Klizon's mandibles clicked rapidly. "The truth is, humans are banned because you're unpredictable, and that makes you dangerous, like an untrained animal that might bite its owner." Alan smiled slightly. "You know, on Earth, we have a saying. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog." "What's a dog?" Klizon asked, momentarily confused. "A predator that humans turned into an ally thousands of years ago," Alan replied. "Something that was dangerous, but became loyal when treated with respect." He walked away, leaving the Vespidian standing in the hallway. In his room, Alan opened his communication terminal and began typing a message to Samantha. "They don't understand," he wrote, "and honestly, it might be better that way." Alien students mocked the human ban. Then they saw the footage. 2 days passed before Alan faced another direct challenge. The cultural comparison class was usually his favorite. Professor Uthnar, a gelatinous Morbusian whose body rippled like blue jelly, encouraged open discussions and treated all species with equal respect. Today's topic was conflict resolution across species. The holographic display showed various approaches to settling disputes, from the ritualized duels of the Arcturians to the mathematical consensus models of the Phosphorians. Each species develops methods suited to their physiology and history, Professor Uthnar explained, her voice coming from a translator device floating beside her gelatinous form. "There is no single correct approach." Alan sat near the back, taking notes and trying not to draw attention. But when Professor Uthnar mentioned Earth's history of warfare, Klizon turned in his seat. "Speaking of humans," the Vespidian said, loudly, his forearms gesturing toward Alan, "I'm curious why they accept being banned from military exercises. If humans are so formidable, why not protest the decision?" The classroom fell silent. Even Professor Uthnar's flowing form seemed to pause, waiting for Alan's response. Alan sighed and ran a hand through his brown hair. He had hoped to avoid this conversation, but Klizon clearly wanted to continue their argument from 2 days ago. "It wasn't our choice," Alan said simply. "The Federation Council voted unanimously." "But why accept it?" Klizon pressed, his mandibles clicking with what Alan recognized as smugness. "Is it because you know you'd embarrass yourselves in real military exercises?" Several students chittered or flashed colors in amusement. Alan noticed Lumi, the crystalline phosphorian, watching him with her faceted eyes. Unlike the others, she seemed genuinely curious. "We accepted the decision because we respect Federation protocols," Alan replied, "even when we disagree with them." "You still haven't answered the question," Tharax joined in, his floating orb eyes swiveling toward Alan. Why were humans banned? The professor said it was because you're incompatible with Federation doctrine. What does that mean? Alan looked to Professor Uthnar, hoping she might change the subject, but her gelatinous form rippled in a way that indicated she too wanted to hear his response. We're different, Alan said finally. Humans approach combat in ways that don't make sense to other species. Different how? Lumi asked, her crystalline voice chiming like small bells. Unlike Klizon and Tharax, her tone held no mockery. You're physically weaker than most spacefaring species. Your reflexes are average at best. You lack natural armor or weapons. Alan nodded. All true. But strength isn't everything in combat. Then what is it? Klizon challenged. Intelligence? The Cerealians are telepathic. Speed? My species can move faster than your eye can track. Technology? The Arcturians had space travel when humans were still using steam engines. It's adaptability, Alan said quietly. Humans don't follow rules in combat. We adapt to whatever situation we face and use whatever works. Even if it's not honorable. The word hung in the air. Several students shifted uncomfortably. In most galactic cultures, warfare followed strict codes of conduct that had evolved over thousands of years. You mean you cheat? Tharax said bluntly. We survive, Alan corrected. There's a difference. Professor Uthanar's translator hummed as she prepared to speak, but Klizon cut her off. These sound like empty claims, the Vespidian said. You talk about being different and adaptable, but where's the proof? I think humans were banned because you're simply ineffective in modern combat situations. Alan felt his patience wearing thin. Think whatever you want. The decision has been made. I have an idea, Voxlar said suddenly. The Arcturian had been quiet until now, his luminescent skin patterns glowing with a slow pulse that indicated deep thought. Why don't we review the footage from the last joint exercise that included humans? Then we can see these mysterious tactics for ourselves. A murmur went through the classroom. Several students nodded in agreement. That footage is restricted, Professor Uthanar said, her gelatinous form rippling with concern. It falls under Federation security protocols. My parent serves on the Federation Security Council. Voxlar replied smoothly, his skin glowing with pride. I have access to their clearance codes. We could view it as an educational exercise. Alan felt his stomach tighten. He knew exactly which footage Voxlar was talking about. The Proxima Centauri exercises from 3 years ago. The incident that had led directly to the human ban. I don't think that's a good idea, Alan said, trying to keep his voice casual. Why not? Klizon asked, his mandibles clicking rapidly. Afraid we'll see how inferior human tactics really are? No, Alan said honestly. I'm afraid of the opposite. This caused several students to exchange confused glances. Lumi's crystalline form sparkled with increased interest. What do you mean by that? She asked. Before Alan could respond, Professor Uthanar moved to the center of the room, her gelatinous form rippling with authority. This discussion, while fascinating, has taken us away from today's lesson plan, she said. However, the question of different approaches to conflict is relevant to our studies. She paused, her translator humming as she considered her next words. Voxlar, if you can secure proper authorization, she emphasized. We could arrange a special session to view the footage. As professor of cultural comparison, I would be interested in using it as a case study. Alan closed his eyes briefly. This was exactly what he had hoped to avoid. I'll get authorization tonight, Voxlar said, his skin flashing with excitement. We could view it tomorrow after regular classes. As students filed out after class ended, Lumi approached Alan. Her crystalline body reflected the light in rainbow patterns as she moved. Will you join us for the viewing? She asked. Do I have a choice? Alan replied with a small smile. You always have a choice, Lumi said. But I think you should be there, to explain what we see. Alan nodded slowly. I'll be there. But I want to be clear about something. What you're going to see isn't a source of pride for me. It's just who we are. Lumi's crystalline form shimmered with what might have been confusion or curiosity. I look forward to understanding better, she said before walking away. That evening, Alan sent another message to Samantha on the Northern Light. "They're going to watch the Proxima footage tomorrow," he wrote. "I don't know whether to be worried or relieved. Maybe it's time they understood why we're considered dangerous." He stared at the message for a long time before pressing send, wondering if this would improve things for humans at the Academy or make them much, much worse. Alien students mocked the human ban. Then they saw the footage. The secure viewing room was located in the restricted wing of the Academy. Alan arrived last, finding 5 others already seated in the dimly lit space. Cleason and Thorax sat together, their excitement visible in the Vespidians' rapidly moving mandibles and the Cerealians' brightly glowing orb eyes. Lumi sat apart, her crystalline form catching the light from the display screen. Professor Uthanar hovered near the back, her gelatinous body rippling gently. Voxlar stood at the room's control panel, his bioluminescent skin patterns glowing with pride. "I secured proper authorization for an educational review," he announced. "We have access to all footage from the Proxima Centauri joint exercises 3 standard years ago." Alan took a seat nearest the door. His stomach felt tight. He had been a first-year cadet when the exercises happened, but everyone on Earth had seen the recordings. They had become required viewing at the Earth Defense Force Academy. "Before we begin," Professor Uthanar said, her translator giving her voice a formal tone, "I want to clarify that we are viewing this footage for educational purposes only. Our goal is to understand different tactical approaches, not to judge or mock any species." Her gelatinous form turned slightly toward Alan. "Mr. Parker, would you like to provide any context before we begin?" Alan hesitated, then shook his head. "It's better if you see it first without my explanation influencing your perception." Voxelar's skin flashed with impatience. "The scenario was a boarding action against a disabled vessel," he explained as he activated the display. Each species sent a 5-member team. The vessel was controlled by combat drones programmed to defend against intruders. The display flickered to life, showing a tactical overview of a large ship floating in space. Small colored dots represented the different species teams as they prepared to board. "The blue dots are Arcturians," Voxelar explained proudly. "The green are Vespidians, yellow are Cerealians, and red are humans." They watched as the exercise began. The Arcturian team moved with precision, following standard Federation boarding protocols. They entered through a single point, established a secure perimeter, and advanced methodically through the ship's corridors. "Textbook approach," Professor Uthanar commented, her form rippling with approval. Next came the Vespidian team. Using their natural speed and 4-armed dexterity, they moved faster than the Arcturians, but followed a similar pattern. The Cerealians used their telepathic abilities to detect drones before engaging them, giving them an advantage in clearing rooms. Then the human team appeared on screen. "Wait, why are they separating?" Lumi asked, her crystalline structure tinkling with confusion. The 5 human team members had split up immediately after boarding. 3 went in different directions while 2 stayed together. "That makes no tactical sense," Thorax commented, his orb eyes spinning with disapproval. "They're violating basic unit integrity." All eyes were fixed on the screen as the human team, Captain, identified as Lieutenant Laura Simmons, deliberately triggered an alarm in one section of the ship. Immediately, most of the drones began moving toward her position. She's sacrificing herself to draw attention. Cleason's mandibles clicked rapidly. "But why? The exercise doesn't reward self-sacrifice." Alan remained silent, watching his classmates' reactions more than the screen. The display split to show multiple views as the other human team members moved through different sections of the ship. They weren't fighting the drones directly. Instead, they were doing something to the ship's systems. "Are they venting atmosphere in specific sections?" Professor Uthanar's form rippled with disbelief. Indeed, 2 of the humans were systematically sealing off sections of the ship and then opening them to space, causing any drones inside to be sucked out into the vacuum. "That's not allowed," Voxlar exclaimed, his skin flashing with bright patterns of outrage. "Combat drones aren't designed to operate in vacuum." Meanwhile, the human captain was leading the drones that had responded to the alarm on a chase through the ship's corridors. She wasn't trying to defeat them, just keep them occupied. The fifth human, positioned near the ship's engineering section, was doing something to the power systems. Suddenly, gravity failed in 3 sections of the ship where drones were concentrated. The machines floated helplessly, unable to maneuver. "They're using the ship itself as a weapon," Lumi observed, her voice lacking the outrage of the others. "They're turning the environment against the defenders." The remaining human team members converged on the ship's command center, facing minimal resistance since most drones had been disabled by vacuum, zero gravity, or were still chasing the captain. They secured the objective in less than half the time of any other team. When it was over, a stunned silence filled the viewing room. Cleason's mandibles clicked nervously. "That's not how military exercises are supposed to work." "No," Alan agreed quietly. "It's not." "They didn't engage in direct combat with most of the drones," Thorax observed, his orb eyes dimmed with confusion. "They just rendered them irrelevant." Professor Uthanar's gelatinous form had gone completely. Still, a sign of deep concern among her species. "Mr. Parker, is this typical of human tactics?" Alan nodded slowly. "We call it asymmetric warfare. When you can't match your opponent's strength, you change the rules of engagement." "But there are protocols," Voxler protested, his skin now pulsing with angry red patterns. "Military exercises have established parameters. In real combat, there are no parameters," Alan replied. "There's just survival. Humans plan for worst-case scenarios where we're outmatched and need to get creative." Lumi's crystalline form shimmered as she processed this information. "Your team achieved the objective with perfect efficiency and no casualties," she noted. "From a purely results-based perspective, the human approach was superior." "Superior but dishonorable," Thorax countered, his orb eyes swiveling toward Lumi. "Military exercises are meant to test coordination and combat skills, not this." Alan leaned forward in his seat. "Think about it from our perspective. Humans are physically weaker than most Federation species. We don't have forearms, telepathy, or exoskeletons. In a fair fight, we lose. So we make sure the fight isn't fair." Professor Uthanar finally moved, her gelatinous form rippling as she addressed the group. "There is more footage from this exercise. The human team was not the only one to complete the objective." "I want to see the others," Cleason said, his earlier mockery replaced by genuine curiosity. "And I think we should see the debriefing session," Lumi added. "I want to hear how the human team explained their approach." Alan felt a mix of pride and unease. Part of him was glad they were finally beginning to understand. Another part, worried about what would happen when they saw the full extent of human tactical thinking. "The debriefing footage is more concerning than what you just saw," he warned. "More concerning how?" Thorax asked. Alan met the floating orb eyes directly. "What you just saw wasn't our best effort. Those were just standard tactics." An uncomfortable silence filled the room as the aliens processed this information. "I believe we have seen enough for today," Professor Uthnar said finally. "We will continue this educational review tomorrow, if you are all willing." As they filed out of the viewing room, Alan noticed the others looking at him differently. The mockery was gone, replaced by something he couldn't quite identify. It wasn't respect exactly, it was caution. Alien students mocked the human ban. Then they saw the footage. Alan didn't sleep well that night. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his dormitory room, thinking about the looks on the aliens' faces as they watched the footage. The mockery was gone, but what replaced it might be worse. Fear, confusion, and in some cases, disgust. His communication terminal blinked with a new message from Samantha. "How did they react?" she asked. "About as well as you'd expect," Alan typed back. "They think we don't fight fair." Samantha's reply came quickly. "We don't. That's the point." The next morning, classes felt different. In the dining hall, other students gave Alan a wider berth than usual. Conversations paused when he walked by. Even the professors seemed to watch him more carefully. Lumi found him as he ate lunch alone. "May I join you?" the crystalline phosphorian asked, her form catching the light in rainbow patterns. Alan nodded, gesturing to the empty seat across from him. "The others are talking about yesterday's viewing. Lumi said, settling her crystalline body carefully on the chair. Cleason thinks humans should be permanently banned from all military cooperation, not just exercises. And what do you think? Alan asked. Lumi's faceted eyes studied him. I think we misunderstood what makes your species dangerous. The word hung between them. Dangerous. Not strong or skilled or clever. Dangerous. We're not dangerous to our allies, Alan said. Just to our enemies. The distinction isn't always clear in combat, Lumi replied. The viewing continues after afternoon classes. Professor Uthnar has invited Dean Krelvor to supervise. Alan nodded. The dean's presence meant the academy was taking this seriously. He wasn't sure if that was good or bad. When afternoon classes ended, Alan made his way back to the secure viewing room. This time, he found not just the previous group, but also Dean Krelvor, a tall Octavian whose age showed in the faded colors of his 8 tentacles. The dean's presence made the room feel smaller, more formal. Mr. Parker, the dean acknowledged, with a slight bow of his upper body. Professor Uthnar has informed me of yesterday's educational review. I felt it important to observe today's session personally. Alan bowed in return following Octavian custom. I understand, Dean Krelvor. The others filed in silently. Cleason kept all 4 arms close to his body, a defensive posture among Vespidians. Thorax's orbis were dimmer than usual. Only Voxlar seemed eager to continue, his skin pulsing with bright patterns as he took his place at the control panel. Today we will view the debriefing sessions from the Proxima Centauri exercise, Professor Uthnar explained, her gelatinous form rippling gently. Each team leader discussed their performance and strategy after completing the objective. The IEI screen flickered to life, showing the Arcturian team leader giving a detailed breakdown of their approach. He spoke of honor, discipline, and adherence to established protocols. The Vespidian and Cerealian leaders followed with similar reports. Then came the human debriefing. Captain Laura Simmons stood confidently, addressing a room of alien military officers. Our approach prioritized mission success with minimal risk to team members, she explained, her voice matter-of-fact. By manipulating the ship's environmental systems, we neutralized 78% of defensive drones without direct engagement. One of the alien officers, a Centaurian with a mane of silver filaments, leaned forward. Captain Simmons, your tactics violated 3 provisions of the exercise parameters. Simmons nodded without apology. Yes, sir. In a real combat situation, an enemy wouldn't limit themselves to expected tactics. We believe training should reflect this reality. What struck the viewers most wasn't Simmons's words, but her calm demeanor. She showed no regret for breaking the rules. The recording continued with the rest of her team joining the discussion. They analyzed their performance with clinical detachment. We could have cut another 40 seconds off our time if we'd rerouted power from the auxiliary systems first, suggested a male team member, identified as Ensign Ryan Collins. Or if we'd used the emergency beacon to create electromagnetic interference, added another, Lieutenant Kelly Martinez. The aliens in the viewing room watched in stunned silence as the humans calmly discussed dozens of alternative approaches, each more alarming than the last. They weren't just defending their unconventional tactics, they were planning how to make them even more effective. When the footage ended, Dean Krelvor turned to address the group. His 8 tentacles moved, in a pattern that conveyed grave concern. This, he said slowly, is why the ban exists. It is not discrimination against humans. It is recognition of fundamentally incompatible approaches to military doctrine. But Dean, Lumi asked, her crystalline voice clear in the quiet room. If humans think this way about warfare, aren't they dangerous as allies? All eyes turned to Alan. He felt the weight of their stares, the unspoken fear behind the question. We're dangerous, period, he admitted. That's the point, but we're only truly dangerous when threatened. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. The ban isn't just to protect other species from human tactics. It's to protect humans from being seen as a threat. Cleason's mandibles clicked in, a pattern Alan hadn't heard before. I mocked you before, Alan, I apologize. No need, Alan replied. Most humans don't even realize how differently we think until we encounter other species. Dean Krelvor's tentacles curled thoughtfully. Mr. Parker, would you be willing to explain human military thinking more fully? Not just the tactics we saw, but the underlying philosophy. Alan nodded slowly. He hadn't expected this opportunity. Humans evolved on a planet filled with predators that were stronger, faster, and better armed than we were. We survived by outthinking them, setting traps using the environment, working together in ways our enemies couldn't predict. You brought this mindset to warfare with other humans? Professor Uthnar asked. Yes. Throughout our history, smaller forces defeated larger ones by refusing to fight on the enemy's terms. We don't believe in fair fights. We believe in winning. Tharax's orb eyes had brightened slightly with understanding. Your species survived a death world by outthinking stronger predators, and now you approach everything with that same mindset. Exactly, Alan confirmed. When other species developed space travel, they encountered challenges but not existential threats. Humans faced extinction-level dangers before we even had written language. The room fell silent as the aliens considered this perspective. Alan could see them reassessing everything they thought they knew about humans. There is one more recording we should view, Dean Krelvor said finally. The Federation Security Council debate that led to the human ban. I believe it will help complete our understanding. As Voxler prepared the final recording, Alan caught Lumi's gaze. The Phosphorian's crystalline form shimmered with what might have been respect. Your species is more complex than we realized, she said quietly. All species are, Alan replied. That's why I came to the Academy, to learn about others and to help them understand humans. Understanding, Dean Krelvor commented, is the first step toward true cooperation. Perhaps that is what we are achieving today. The screen flickered back to life, showing the Federation Council chamber. Alan settled back to watch, feeling a strange mix of pride and humility. For the first time since arriving at the Academy, he felt seen for what he really was, not a weak human or a dangerous predator, but something more complicated. A survivor. Alien students mocked the human ban. Then they saw the footage. The final viewing session took place 3 days later. Dean Krelvor had requested time to secure proper authorization for accessing the Federation Council recordings. In the meantime, Alan noticed a change in how his fellow students treated him. The mockery had completely vanished, replaced by a mixture of caution, curiosity, and something that almost felt like respect. When Alan entered the secure viewing room, he found more than just the original group waiting. Several other professors had joined, along with a few senior students who specialized in interspecies relations. The Academy was taking this very seriously now. Dean Krelvor nodded to Alan as he took his seat. Mr. Parker, I want to thank you for your patience and openness during this process. What began as an unauthorized viewing has become a valuable educational opportunity. Alan nodded, slightly uncomfortable with the attention. I'm just glad everyone is finally trying to understand. Voxler stood at the control panel, his skin patterns subdued compared to his earlier excitement. The recording we're about to see is from the closed session of the Federation Security Council, where they debated and ultimately approved the human ban 3 standard years ago. The screen flickered to life, showing a large circular chamber. Representatives from 12 different species sat around a curved table, with the Federation High Commissioner, an ancient Arcturian with pale blue skin, presiding at the center. We have reviewed the Proxima Centauri exercise results, the High Commissioner began, and must now decide whether to continue allowing human participation in joint military activities. A Centaurian representative spoke first, her silver mane rippling with concern. The human approach violates fundamental principles of honorable engagement. They showed no respect for established protocols. Next came a Vespidian, his exoskeleton darker and more weathered than Cleason's. It's not just about protocol. Human tactics are unpredictable to the point of being destabilizing. Their presence makes coordinated operations difficult. The Earth. Representative, a stern-faced woman with gray hair, listened quietly to each criticism before responding. The Federation asked Earth to join because our different perspective has value, she pointed out. Now you wish to exclude us for being exactly what you recruited us to be, different. An Octavian counselor's tentacles moved in a pattern of respectful disagreement. Ambassador Lee, we value Earth's contributions to the Federation in many areas, but military cooperation requires shared understanding of acceptable tactics. What you mean, Ambassador Lee replied, is that our tactics make you uncomfortable because they highlight vulnerabilities in your own defenses. The room fell silent. In the viewing room, Alan saw his fellow students exchange glances. Ambassador, Lee had stated plainly what humans often thought but rarely said aloud, that other species didn't want to confront their own weaknesses. A more Busian representative, her gelatinous form a deep purple, spoke next. Perhaps we should hear from the human military directly. Admiral Chen is present as an observer. The camera shifted to show a man in an Earth Defense Force uniform. Admiral Chen stood with hands clasped behind his back, his expression neutral. Admiral, the High Commissioner invited, would you care to explain human military doctrine to this council? Admiral Chen stepped forward. Human military thinking is shaped by our history and biology. We were never the strongest species on our planet. We survived by being adaptable and unpredictable. But surely, a Phosphorian counselor interjected, her crystalline voice tinkling through the chamber, as you developed technology and civilization, you established rules for warfare? We did, Chen agreed. And throughout our history, those who strictly followed the rules often lost to those who adapted. In space, we face species with natural advantages we can never match. Our only option is to leverage our creativity. The Arcturian High Commissioner leaned forward. Admiral, do you understand why other species find this approach concerning? Perfectly, Chen replied without hesitation. We're unpredictable, and unpredictability creates fear. But consider this. In a real conflict against a hostile force, would you prefer humans fighting alongside you or against you? The question hung in the air. The council members shifted uncomfortably. What if, the Centaurian representative asked slowly, human unpredictability one day turns against the Federation itself? Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. Earth joined the Federation because we believe in peaceful cooperation. But we will never apologize for doing whatever it takes to protect our people. In the viewing room, Alan watched the aliens' reactions to this statement. Many seemed troubled by the implications, but none looked surprised. The recording continued, showing the council's deliberations. Eventually, the High Commissioner called for a vote. The ban passed unanimously with Earth abstaining. As the recording ended, Dean Krelvor turned to address the room. The council's decision was not based on prejudice, but on a realistic assessment of incompatible approaches. It was in many ways a recognition of human capability rather than weakness. Alan looked around at the assembled aliens. Does everyone understand now? The ban isn't about keeping a weak species out of military exercises. It's about containing a potentially dangerous one. Cleason finished, his mandibles moving slowly in a pattern of realization. I wouldn't say containing, Professor Uthnar corrected, her gelatinous form rippling gently. Perhaps acknowledging would be more accurate. Lumi's crystalline form caught the light as she turned toward Alan. Your admiral asked an important question. Would we prefer humans as allies or enemies? I believe most species would choose allies even with the complications. Voxlar, who had been quiet throughout the viewing, finally spoke. My parent serves on the Security Council. They voted for the ban, but also advocated for increased human participation in other Federation activities, trade, science, diplomacy. Because we're useful, Alan said with a slight smile. Because you're valuable, Dean Krelvor corrected. Different perspectives strengthen the Federation even when they create challenges. As the group dispersed, Tharax floated beside Alan in the corridor. Your species survived a death world by outthinking stronger predators, the Cerealian observed. Now you approach everything with that same mindset. Alan nodded. That's what makes us who we are. And the truly terrifying thing, Tharax continued, his orb eyes swiveling to meet Alan's gaze, is that what we saw in those exercises wasn't even your best effort? Those were just standard tactics. Yes, Alan admitted. There's a reason we prefer diplomatic solutions whenever possible. That evening, Alan entered the dormitory common area to find the atmosphere had changed completely. Instead of the usual mockery or avoidance, Cleason actually offered him a seat at their table. "Tell us about Earth," the Vespedian requested, his tone respectful. "We should probably understand your homeworld better." Alan smiled slightly as he joined them. "I'd be happy to. Though I should warn you, the planet is even more dangerous than its inhabitants." For the first time since arriving at the academy, Alan felt like he belonged. Not because the aliens had started to like humans, but because they had started to understand them. Fear had given way to respect, and mockery to genuine curiosity. As he began to describe Earth's varied environments and deadly natural hazards, Alan caught himself thinking of Samantha's last message. Sometimes it takes seeing us through alien eyes to appreciate what humanity really is. Now, finally, these alien students were beginning to see.